Horrorama. What a weird world the world of storage unit rentals turned out to be. On a whim, in the doldrums between writing projects, I called the number I found in the classifieds. Part-time help needed for front desk work and light security. Yellow, the voice answered. Blue, I said. There was a pause. Store all self-storage, the voice said. Yes, I hear you're looking for some part-time help. Hold on, the voice said. Jimmy, phone. There was a scuffling of the phone being transferred to Jimmy. This is Jimmy. Yes, Jimmy, I'm calling in regards to your ad in the Blade. 8 an hour, nights and weekends, applications in person. The phone clicked dead. Well, I thought, store all self-storage was at the end of South, where the few shitty houses still standing all lean and are nearly all boarded up. Its closest neighbors were grain docks for the river barges and bare, empty fields littered with trash. Toledo. I pulled into the small parking lot in front of the little trailer front office. The place was completely enclosed with a high barbed wire-topped chain-link fence. Rust glittered like bloody diamonds in the faint drizzle. I remember wondering if I really wanted to spend hours of my life, time I could have spent reading or writing or jacking off, at this dump. I can read here, I reasoned. If it's only nights and weekends, I'm sure this place will require as much work as bras on 10-year-olds, sprinklers in the rain. I racked my brain for something funny that didn't require a lick of work. Nothing of note came. The blockage continued. The doorknob was cold and wet and stuck. I tried it several times before giving up and banging on the flimsy door. Standing on the shaky wooden steps, I felt the trailer move with the man's steps. The door opened and a pale, balding incantation of Jabba the Hutt squinted out into the mist at me. Yeah? The man asked. The voice was unmistakable, despite the unlit stogie clenched between his teeth. Mr. Yellow from the phone. Afternoon. I'm here to apply for the part-time job. I extended my hand, but Mr. Yellow didn't take it. Jimmy, he called, not taking his beady eyes off me. The trailer shook again, and Jimmy, a near mirror image of Mr. Yellow, stood looking over Mr. Yellow's shoulder at me. Yeah? Jimmy asked. I'm here to apply for the job. 8 an hour, nights and weekends, he started. I know. You told me on the phone. Both men seemed to suck in their breaths at my interruption. They were too identical not to be brothers. Two fat, pale, sickly yellow Jabbas. I've got to get this job, I thought. I signed and dated the stained and crinkled application and tried to slide it across the particle board desk to Jimmy Klobbs. There was too much other shit on his desk: crushed soda cans, fast food wrappers, receipts, various documents, a paperweight statue of a standing bear with a bald eagle resting on its shoulder for this to happen. I handed it across the desk instead. Jimmy Klobbs, with his brother Clarence Klobbs, whom I still can only think of as Mr. Yellow, reading over his shoulder, scanned my application. His eyes were almost closed, they were slitted so tight. They were a long time with the single-page stock application. I was overqualified. I knew that. I don't think a GED or, God willing, a high school diploma, something of a holy grail in Toledo, were required for the work the job demanded. With a clicking noise somewhere deep within the fat folds of his face, Jimmy Klobbs let the paper float onto the desk. You'll start tomorrow night, 9 to 7. No drinking, no drugs, no fucking up, Jimmy Klobbs said. I smiled. God help me, I actually smiled. No training required, the ad should have read. No supervision required, the ad should have also read. No work required, I thought the classified ad should have read. I was wrong. Jimmy Klobbs was already gone for the weekend when I got there that next night, Friday. Mr. Yellow had his legs up on the cluttered desk. in a cloud of cheap cigar smoke. "'Bout time," he huffed at me when I entered the little trailer, knocking first, of course. I checked the watch on my wrist. 8:45 p.m. I decided not to make an issue of it, not the greatest first day on the job impression. I took off my raincoat and folded it over my arm. "If anything happens, call the police," Mr. Yellow said. When he stood, he actually had to use both of his hands to hoist his massive legs off the desk, and half of the shit on the desk went with his legs. He didn't notice, or more likely, didn't deign the mess important enough to pick up. "Got a number for Jimmy, Mr. Klobbs. For me to call in case of an emergency." "Call the police," Mr. Yellow said. He brushed by me but stopped at the door. There was a faded Hustler centerfold scotch taped to the back of the door, which I hadn't noticed the day before. Mr. Yellow stuck his grubby sausage fingers into his pants and fished out a set of keys. He tossed them to me, and I caught them. Mr. Yellow smiled as if he hadn't expected me to be quick enough for such an action. "See you in the morning," he said, and shut the door behind him. I stared at the keys in my hands. There were 3 of them. 3. I figured there should have been hundreds of keys, one for each of the little roll-up mesh steel-doored units. I wasn't told I had to make rounds. I wasn't told I couldn't sleep. I wasn't told what to do if a customer knocked on the door or lost his key. Nothing. I plopped down onto the torn leather seat behind the desk and stared at the blonde licking the redhead's clitoris on the back of the trailer's door. This is going to be great, I thought. I was 4 stories deep into the short works of Leo Tolstoy when the limo pulled up to the electronic gate. I watched from a little hole I made in the foggy front window. The driver's side window smoothly rolled down and a jacketed arm emerged to enter several digits into the keypad. The gate jerked into motion and slid open. The window rolled up and the car disappeared into the murk of the storage unit maze. I ripped a corner off the first piece of paper I grabbed from the desk. To my amusement, it was my application. I marked my page with the corner and tossed my book on the chair. I stepped out into the night just as the gate finished locking itself back into the closed position. I lit a cigarette and strolled through the shroud of mist to the gate. I peered through the holes in the fence, but the limo was gone, around one of the corners out of sight. I inhaled on the cigarette and coughed. Tastes like shit, I thought. Smells like shit, too. I started smoking because I thought it was something writers were supposed to do. I pictured Elmore Leonard's bug-eyed testicle head peering up from his typewriter in a cloud of menthol. It gave my hands something to do, because Lord knows they weren't typing anything of worth. The blockage still reigned supreme. I stubbed out the cigarette with my boot and jangled the set of keys Mr. Yellow had given me between my hands. There was a key slot in the gate. I hesitated before trying the first of the keys, trying to convince myself it was probably one of my job duties, though unstated, to do a round or 2 through the place every night. As luck would have it, shit luck I now know it to have been, the first key turned easily in the lock and I slid open the gate enough to pass through. I eased it shut again and lit another cigarette, determined to find or at least fabricate an enjoyment for the things. There were weak orange security lights every 50 yards or so. They hung higher than I thought necessary, and the light that found its way to the cracked and pockmarked pavement was of little use. I stood listening for clues as to which direction the limo had headed under the first of the security lights. I squinted my eyes and craned my left ear, the far better functioning of my Dumbo appendages, toward the starless night sky. The light looked like a hazy pumpkin head of some leering autumnal deity. I thought I heard a whimper in the night. A slight noise it was. As soon as I thought I heard it, it dissipated and I wasn't sure I had actually heard anything. I took the first left and started down the long, narrow lane of shut-up little garages. I couldn't see the limo, but the sound had come from that general direction. I finished the cigarette and mentally patted myself on the back for not gagging or coughing. I walked as quietly as I could. I chided myself about this. I was the security guard after all. I reached the end of the lane and turned right, following the rusted fence. The place was much larger than I had expected. The security lights looked like blinking buoys in some murky Lake Erie nightscape. The horn of a barge from the nearby Maumee River, sounding as I walked, only increased this vision. I was not protected from the wind on this side of the units. I blinked back tears and wiped my runny nose. The farther I walked, the fewer security lights shone until not one shone, and a heavy blanket of wet night hung over everything. It reminded me of the time I'd built a fort out of quilts and lawn chairs in the backyard, and too preoccupied with my Batman comics, was caught out in a torrential downpour. I walked on in darkness, the grey sides of the concrete block storage unit buildings seeming like sleeping beasts on the night's shore. My cigarette had long since burned out, but I hadn't noticed. I walked with the stub of it hanging from my bottom lip, lost in my thoughts. Why hadn't I become the big, famous writer I'd always supposed I'd become? Weren't my vampire stories subtle enough? Didn't they have more restraint than any of the other gore splashers? Didn't Dr. Hall find the second draft of my Victorian comedy novel, Shrugging Buggies, hilarious and well-crafted? I mean, he wrote that on the manuscript. The red ink flashed in my mind, and I retraced the shapes of the letters smiling in reverie. I'd been so proud. I came to an abrupt stop in the harsh glow of the limo's taillights. My breath caught in my throat and the cigarette dropped from my lip. The driver's side rear door of the limo stood open, as did the door to a unit some 5 feet from it. There was a faint green glow emanating from within the unit. I opened my mouth but found it too dry to speak. I cleared my throat and tasted the nasty cigarettes. "Hello," I called. There was no response. I stood still, quiet, listening. A faint wet noise came from in there, like the sound of milking a cow or a baby suckling from the teat. I called again, but my voice wouldn't rise above a whisper. There was a whimper from in there. The suckling sound did not abate. I felt dumb, numb, my feet heavy or glued to the insides of my boots concreted to the pavement. I longed for the lesbian scene and the dingy interior of the front office trailer. Idiot, I thought. All you had to do was sit there and read, and hopefully learn something from old Leo. Now God only knows what you've stumbled on. With a will I didn't know I had, I stepped forward. What I saw left me slack-jawed and confused. Surrounded by a pulsing green glow, a woman in a tight black dress was being enveloped. That's the only word for it, enveloped. Just the faintest wisp of her blonde hair was visible. The top part of her head wasn't there. I'm not saying her brain was out or anything like that. Just the top part of her head wasn't there. Like it had never been there. The woman whimpered again. Her mouth was slack as if she was asleep. The green pulsated, and more of her head disappeared. I felt sick. I wanted to throw up the shitty McDonald's hamburger I had eaten in my car on the way to store all. I didn't throw up, though. Not then, anyway. I stepped from the door to the storage unit and leaned back against the cool concrete blocks. Call the police. That's what Mr. Yellow told me. If anything happens, call the police. I imagined how the tape of that distress call would sound. 911, what's your emergency? There's a glowing green cloud making a woman disappear. Please send help. Sir, 911 isn't a phone line. Crank callers will be prosecuted. There was another flash from the open door of the storage unit. I saw it reflected off the black-tinted windows of the limo. Christ, I thought. That's when the driver's side door of the limo opened and a man in a dark suit stepped out. I was too stunned to move. The man's shoes were polished so well I could almost make out the reflection of the blonde and the blob on them. "It's best you leave, sir," the man said. He was standing over me, blank-faced. He had a light pencil mustache running the course of his thin lips. His eyes were hard to make out in the gloom, but I could have sworn there wasn't the slightest drop of white in them. Black as the night, they seemed. "What?" I think I floundered for the words for several moments, a stutterer stammering himself silent. The driver patiently waited until I had petered out. "You're going to get up, walk back the way you came and forget what you saw," the driver said. His face was flushed in green for a moment. There was a moan from the unit that stopped abruptly. The sound was like someone waking suddenly. "Go," the man said. I went. I don't remember seeing the limo leave. It must have, though. When the sun finally blotted out the night, I made myself go back. No one was there. The limo was gone. The unit shut up tight. Not the faintest reminder, aside from my terror-filled memories, of what had taken place there only a few hours before. I put my good ear against the damp metal door, but didn't hear anything other than the pulse pounding in my head. I knocked, quietly at first, then louder. Then I remembered the keys in my pocket. The first one I tried didn't work. The second did. It turned noiselessly and lifted 1/4 of an inch from the ground. I did my best to slow my breathing, then yanked the door up. It was empty. The shitty little door opened and Mr. Yellow waddled inside. He slammed the door shut and set down the bag of fast food on the desk. He made to take off his jacket and froze when he saw me. "Morning," Mr. Yellow said. "Morning." He took off his jacket and threw it behind the door. I didn't move. He plopped down onto one of the 3 little plastic chairs against the wall. He hung off both sides generously. He looked every bit the walrus balancing on a circus ball. He opened the bag and started eating. "Call the police," he told me. "Call the police." "How was your first night?" he said after some time. Bits of hash brown clung loosely to his salt and pepper chin stubble. He didn't look at me, just kept right on stuffing fried potatoes and greasy biscuit into his glistening pink mouth. "Interesting," I said. Mr. Yellow's chomping paused, and he shot me a sidelong look. "Anything I need to know about?" he asked. "I didn't call the police," I said. He nodded and continued with his breakfast. Saturday night came on, and I was back at the store all. The weather had cleared during the day, but clouds had come in with the twilight. Mr. Yellow gave me the keys without so much as a word. I read The Devil and moved on to the Kreutzer Sonata. The night moved on toward morning. Just me and Leo. I smoked a pack of Winston Lights. I waited for the limo to come again, but didn't. I did one round around the place in the quiet of the night, the sounds of the barges on the Mormie, the only company I had besides my terrible memory. I didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary. I didn't work again until Thursday night of the next week. Jimmy Klobbs was in the office with Mr. Yellow. They were huddled over some papers and either didn't notice me come in or did not find it worth acknowledging. "Evening," I said. Mr. Yellow grunted a reply. I sat down and listened to them talk. They were discussing knocking out one of the walls of the 10x10 units and combining it with another. "Wouldn't it be cheaper to do 2 of the 10x5s?" Mr. Yellow asked. "He needs the space, long-term too. Call Marty and get it done." Mr. Yellow grunted his assent, and Jimmy Klobbs left without so much as a word to me. "Who's the new client?" I asked. Mr. Yellow didn't answer. I repeated myself. "Some guy. Wants more space than we got available right now," Mr. Yellow said. "What's he storing?" "That's none of our business now, is it?" He shuffled the paperwork around on the desk, feigning some sense of order. "See you in the morning," he said. He cut out, and I was left with Leo, nearly completed. A sedan pulled up around 3 in the morning. A gloved hand emerged from the driver's side window and punched in the gate code. The car seemed to be rocking back and forth. The gate opened and the car disappeared inside. "Here we go again," I told Maureen, the name I'd given the blonde on the back of the trailer door. I stepped out into the early morning and lit a cigarette, a misty ultra-light. I opened the gate and crept through. I followed the smell of burnt oil. The sedan wasn't in good shape. I rounded a corner and watched as a man decked out completely in leather vest, leather pants, leather wristlets and gloves, leather skull cap opened the trunk of his car. He stood a step back from the car as he opened it, making him look awkward, like the hug you give your middle school girlfriend after a make-out session when you don't want her to know you've got a raging hard-on. The car shook and a leather-clad leg kicked out, followed by another. The leg swung wildly and the man took a quick step forward. His fists flew into the trunk like little leather lightning strikes. The leg stopped swinging and dropped limp, the right hanging out of the trunk. The man wiped his fists on the back of his leather pants, and they shone dully in the orange glow of the security lights. The man reached in and scooped up the person in the trunk. His body heaved with the effort. "What the—" My thought was interrupted by the immediate need to make myself scarce. I jumped back around the corner and waited a slow count of 5 before peeking my head around it again. The trunk stood open, but the 2 leather people were nowhere in sight. I took my steps slowly and as quietly as I could. I didn't hear anything. I looked into the open trunk, but it was completely empty. I looked in through the windows of the car, but it was empty too. Not so much as a gas receipt was to be seen. The car didn't have any license plates, not at the front or the rear. Call the police. No, I don't know what I saw. It could have been anything. I need more information. What an idiot I was. "This doesn't concern you," a gruff voice said. The man in leather stood huddled under the door of a unit. I hadn't even heard it open. "What is going on here?" I asked. I tried to muster all the authority I could in the voice of a security guard, and I'm not sure how successful I was. "None of your concern," the man said. His face was shaved very close to the skin, but the skin was blue as the stubble began to sprout again. He wasn't wearing a shirt under the open leather vest, and his chest was the hairiest I've ever seen. He could have been a gorilla. He stepped out from under the unit's door. "What is going on here?" I said. I cringed at the raised octave and the quiver in my voice. "It's time you leave," he said. He turned back toward the unit. Inside, a man hung from the ceiling, suspended by his shoulders on thick metal hooks. His limp body spun slightly, like a wind chime touched by the faintest of summer breezes. The man slid the unit's door shut. His eyes burned into mine, and he was out of sight. "This is Richard Dennison. I work at the store all on South. I need someone here quick. I think someone is being murdered." It took them 25 minutes to get there. One police car pulled up to the front office trailer. Its lights weren't even flashing. No siren blaring. The cop left his cruiser running and stepped out to meet me. "What's the problem?" he asked. "I saw someone take a person from their trunk into one of the units." His face was pure incredulity. "You been drinking tonight?" "No, not at all," I said. My face felt fit to burst. The man was hanging on some meat hook or something. "We got to hurry," I said. I opened the gate and the cop, seemingly unwillingly, followed me. I had to slow myself. He wasn't showing the faintest semblance of haste. He was walking the dog his kids wanted and promised to take care of, but hadn't. "What's your problem?" I asked. "Mistake." "You better control yourself, son," he said. He came to a complete stop. "You better just calm the hell down," he said. "You on drugs?" "No." I started walking again. We turned the corner and the sedan was gone. "The car was right here," I said. I could still smell the burnt oil. "You get the plate number?" The officer opened his breast pocket and took hold of the little notebook he had nestled there. It didn't have any plates on it. The cop left the notebook in his pocket and sighed. "Which unit?" "This one." I put my ear to the door, but didn't hear anything from inside. "Open it." I unlocked it and slid it up, prepared for horror. The man chime clean to the meat, twirling on the hook. A butchery. The room was empty. My mouth hung open and the pulse beat in my temples. This couldn't be, I thought. I'd seen it. There had to be blood or something. The floor was clean, not so much as a speck of dust. "This some sort of joke?" the cop asked. He stepped inside, ducking slightly under the lip of the door. He walked from one side to the other, looking from the floor to the ceiling. Nothing hung from the ceiling, no hooks, no place for a hook to have been. Just the braces running parallel with the drive outside. "No," I said, "I saw the man. He was all in leather and had another man in leather hanging from a hook right here." "How long you been working here? They drug test you." The officer flicked his flashlight into life and directed it into my eyes. I sat behind the desk and couldn't bring myself to open the book. I sat there staring into nothing until Mr. Yellow came in at 7. "Morning," he said. I got up from the chair and made my way to the door. I had to side-straddle the plastic chairs to let him pass. He smelled of stale sweat and onions. I shut the door to the sound of the crinkling of the fast food bag. The cursor blinked, indented in the empty document. The words weren't coming. Again, the words weren't coming. I couldn't focus. The man in leather, the green blob, the humiliating sobriety test. What am I going to do? I'm worthless. I slammed the laptop shut and went to the library. I read At the Mountains of Madness from start to finish. Lovecraft seemed like the only option. Leo wasn't fantastic enough, not for the life I'd stumbled into. The idea struck me as I returned the novella to the shelf. I could break down the wall by recounting the strange happenings of the store all. I could rework them into a diary entry. Someone else working at a self-storage facility, journaling the entire time. Plus, it was the only income I contributed, a fact which Lucy reminded me of quite often. "Evening," I said. Mr. Yellow grunted. "Think I could pick up a few more hours?" He paused. "I'll have to check with Jimmy." "Okay, night," I said. Mr. Yellow left. I brought a green spiral-bound notebook and a pen. I opened it and started writing. The limo pulled up just before midnight. I couldn't believe my luck. I dropped to the floor and stole glances from between the blinds. I scoured the thing, looking for any detail worth noting. The windows were impossible to see through, but I thought I saw a faint glow of green coming from the rear. I probably imagined it, but scribbled it into the notebook anyway. The truth can't get in the way of a good story. I let the limo pull through the gate and slipped out into the night to follow. I walked around the facility, deciding that coming from another direction would be the best option. Didn't want the driver to stop me from my observations. The limo was idling, the brake lights much brighter than the security lamps high overhead. The unit door was standing open, and the green glow spilled out into the night, mingling with the light from the brakes, looking like some demented Christmas decorations. I clung to the shadows, careful not to be seen. I scribbled in my notebook and inched closer, trying to get a view of the inside of the unit. There wasn't a way to see inside unless I stood where the limo parked. The driver would be watching. Shit, I thought. I didn't want to meet the blob. I just wanted to see it. Watch it. Understand or at least learn enough to fabricate the rest. The block, the wall I'd taken to thinking of it as, loomed over me. I retreated back around the corner to think. Can't creep up on the limo, far too dangerous. I want a story, not death. I could try the roof, but I didn't think the height would give much of a view inside. Headlights suddenly illuminated the fence behind me. I heard the closing of car doors, followed by the limo lurching into motion. I bolted, running as fast as I could around to the other side of the unit building. I ducked into the space between the door and the building and made myself as thin as possible. The limo passed slowly, but did not stop. I crept around the corner to watch it through the gate before retracing my steps to the unit. It was empty, not a thing to be seen now. God damn it, I said. I opened the unit directly across from it, thinking I could wait in there behind a peephole for the limo to return another night. It was completely stuffed with furniture. There was barely enough room to close the door again. So much for that. I opened the unit to the left of the blobs. It was empty. The wall separating the two units, as well as the units on the other side of the building, was constructed of concrete blocks. I'd need a drill or something to make a peephole. I scanned the roof and saw that concrete stopped some 3 feet under the wooden ceiling. I jumped, grabbed one of the support beams, and pulled myself up. There was a thin paneling there, much like the interior of a single wide. I'd have to be waiting in here when the limo pulled up. I didn't like the idea of sitting holed up in a storage unit for nights on end until the blob made its return. The other side. Duh. I walked around the building to the unit directly behind. It was empty. I'll bring a drill tomorrow and make a small hole in the paneling, I decided. As soon as Mr. Yellow was gone, I grabbed the cordless drill from my car and drilled the little peephole. I went back to the trailer and described my cunning plan in the green notebook. I waited eagerly through the night, but nothing happened. I left disappointed when Mr. Yellow arrived at 7. Jimmy Clobbs was there when I came in for the Sunday night shift. "You want in some more hours?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I said, closing the door and doing my best to avoid looking at Maureen and her lady lover. "How many?" "As many as you've got available, sir." He nodded. "Okay, let's start with Tuesdays and Wednesdays, along with the weekend shifts. We'll see how that goes and go from there." "Thank you, sir." He left and I described the interaction in the notebook. The sedan came later that night. I was nodding off, my chin against my fist when I saw it. I kicked myself at not thinking of drilling a hole into the unit on the other side of the leather freaks. The sedan pulled up to the gate and was put into park. The driver's door opened and the hairy man got out. He was decked out completely in leather again. He walked up to the trailer and opened the door. I was shaking. I couldn't help it. The man loomed there in the doorway for a moment, his eyes boring into mine. "Mr. Dennison, do we have an understanding?" he asked. "How do you know my name?" He walked over to the desk, leaving the door standing open, but did not sit down in one of the shitty little plastic chairs. He leaned over the mess of the desk until his face was only inches from mine. "You live over in the Heatherdowns village. You frequent the library. You wrote 7 published short stories in the past 5 years. Your wife, Lucy, a pretty little brunette, works at the nursing home down the street. Neither of you have family here." I felt dizzy, like I'd just run a mile holding my breath. "What?" I heard a muffled noise from his rocking car outside. "Do we have an understanding, Mr. Dennison?" The corners of the man's mouth lifted and his glaringly white teeth gleamed down at me. "Yes, sir," I said. He left. I watched him punch his code in and go about his business. I was too shocked to follow. I noted the time. 1:15 a.m. The sedan slowly pulled out of the facility at 1:55 a.m. I held my breath until it pulled out onto South and headed away into empty streets. Then I opened the gate and made my way to the Heatherman's unit, drill in hand. I hesitated with the keys in my hand. He could have booby-trapped it. He probably expects me to open it and see what he's left behind. I strode around the building to the unit on the other side. I opened it and climbed around box after box of shrink-wrapped beanie babies to the back wall. I climbed up and drilled a small hole through the paneling. It was too dark inside the other unit to see anything. I squinted and strained but saw nothing. Just as I was getting ready to drop back down amongst the stuffed animals, the voice spoke. I thought we had an understanding. Stunned, I flinched away from the sound of the leather man's rough voice emanating from the darkness and fell off my perch. The drill clattered beside me and snapped in two. I left it where it lay and scrambled to my feet. I slammed the unit shut and sprinted away toward the front office trailer. He clotheslined me as I rounded the corner, hitting me in the throat and sending me crashing onto my back. All the air was beaten from my lungs, and my throat worked but felt crushed. I floundered on the cracked pavement like a fish out of water. "This will serve as your final warning," the leather man said. He loomed into view over me, his face hard and pitiless. "I cannot have you interfering in my affairs." Air finally found its way into my lungs, and I gasped. What are you?" I asked, breath coming in shuddering gulps. "I will show you." The man's hands were iron. They clasped onto my shoulders and lifted me effortlessly. We walked back to the gate and exited. I turned up toward the trailer, assuming that's where we were heading, but the man's hard stare redirected me down the drive away from the store hall. "Where are we going?" I asked. He didn't answer. There wasn't a car in sight, streets empty at the late hour. We walked around the block to an abandoned factory. This isn't how I'm supposed to die, I thought. This is a bad horror story. This isn't real life. We walked to the backside of the building, past boarded-up windows with spray-painted declarations that the building didn't have any copper to the parked sedan. Those frantic kicking legs replayed in my mind. Shit. "Come on, man," I pleaded. "I just got this job. I didn't know any better. I was just doing my job." He opened the passenger side door for me. I hesitated. "Get in," he said. I got in. We passed the Seagate building at a crawl. The traffic lights blinked sleepily. Nothing moved. "Where are we going?" I asked. The man's leather gloves creaked as he adjusted his grip on the steering wheel. The interior of the car smelled strongly of lemon-scented cleaning solution. The dashboard, though the car must have been an early 90s model, shone as if it were fresh off the lot. The seats, including the back, were completely covered in a thin, clear plastic lining so well installed I doubted it could be noticed until you sat down on it. The sweat from my arse and balls caught and pooled under me on the plastic. "Where are you taking me?" He turned onto Cherry, then off onto a side road following the flow of the Maumee. Boarded-up houses swam by in the closed passenger window, their plywood mouths gaping silent laughter at my circumstances. A man lay on a bus stop bench, asleep. He pulled the car to the curb and left it running. He reached down beside the seat and popped the trunk. I saw it rise in the glow of the brake lights. The man got out of the car and slowly approached the sleeping man on the bench. He hovered over him briefly. I swear he was listening to make sure the man was breathing, and, with a speed I couldn't believe, he set about with a flurry of punches directed at the benchman's head. The struggle was brief due to the severity of the blows. Blood looked black in the night. The man ceased moving, and the leather man scooped him up into his arms. He had to walk by me on his way to the trunk. He stopped at my window for a moment and let his eyes beat down into mine. They shone with a frenzy that did not touch his face. They could have been black holes for all the gravity they had. I couldn't look away. The unconscious man was deposited into the trunk, and we headed back toward the store all. He punched in the code, and the gate slid open in jerks. "It's gonna catch one of these days. Might want to get it looked at," the man said. The car began rocking. For a split second, I thought a tire had blown. I could hear the man in the trunk's voice, quaking and raging, but couldn't make out any of the individual words. "Why haven't you published anything of late, Mr. Dennison?" The trunk popped as the man kicked and punched with everything he had in him. I tried to answer him, but nothing would come out. The kicks and punches slowed into rhythmic pounding. He'd combined his efforts into single blows. "I haven't been able to," I said. "Well, here's you a story." He talked while he worked. He quieted the man in the trunk the same way he did the first time I saw him. The man must have been a boxer or prize fighter of some sort at one time or another. He lifted the man from the trunk and dropped him onto the smooth concrete floor of the empty unit. He went back to the trunk and lifted the floor to space reserved for the sedan's spare. It wasn't there. In its place were two thick clamps with equally thick hooks, which came to needlepoint sharpness at the ends, sheets of plastic, and a selection of knives. "Old family tradition," he said, removing the clamps. He walked into the unit, stepped over the prostrate man, and standing on his tippy toes, attached the clamps to the wooden ceiling braces. They had knobs on the side that he twisted to ensure an even tighter hold. The thin light of the single bulb in the unit flickered off the hooks as they settled near the man's shoulder. "My dad taught me. His dad taught him. Ad infinitum," he said. He retrieved the knives and the plastic from the trunk and let the flooring cover the space again. He tossed them onto the ground in the back corner, then lifted the unconscious man. "You see," he said, the strain of lifting the man not showing in the slightest in his voice. "There is a quota that must be met." He steadied the man on his shoulders and grabbed one of the hooks. "Step inside and shut the door." What else could I have done? I stepped inside and slid the door shut. The lone bulb gave the already small room a claustrophobic feel. The man slid the hook under the man's left shoulder blade. "Now that our understanding is finally understood," he said, he let the man's weight fall onto the hook. Blood flooded out, and the man woke with a cry. "I can be of assistance to you in your time of need. You can help with the quota, and things can continue in everybody's best interest." The hanging man jerked on the hook, but stilled himself almost immediately, as the pain must have worsened with his efforts. The leather man took the other hook and lifted the man by his underarm and let him drop, setting this hook the same as the first. The hanging man didn't scream. The blood ran down his back, soaking through his shirt. The man in leather spun on his heels and unfolded the plastic sheet under the hanging man, just as the first drops of blood began to fall to the ground. The man in leather picked up the thinnest of the knives and went back to the hanging man. "You may want to sit down. Seeing for the first time can be overwhelming." He slit the man's throat. Blood flowed from the smiling wound. The hanging man's eyes widened. His feet kicked. His hands tried to rise to his throat, but the setting of the hooks prevented him. I felt the ridges of the door as I slid to the floor. The room spun and the light seemed hazy. The last thing I saw was the man in leather standing over me, saying something. I couldn't make out his words. Mr. Yellow slammed the door shut, waking me. I shot bolt upright in the chair and saw that I was back in the office. I'd been asleep. For one moment I prayed it had all been a nightmare, but only for one moment. I knew what I had seen, what I had been a part of. Mr. Yellow motioned for me to get up from the chair with his bag of fast food breakfast. I got up and found, surprisingly, that my legs were steady under me. I picked up my notebook and left. A quota, a fountain of blood, a tradition of spilling and ensuring, a noble but unenvious duty. I wrote that morning like I had never written before. The words flashed across the screen faster than I could read. I was a man possessed. The limo pulled up to the gate and passed through. I threw down my notebook and stormed after it. I slipped by unnoticed to the other side of the building. I unlocked it, opened it just enough to slide underneath, and closed it gently behind me. The unit was in complete darkness. I couldn't see my hand inches from my face. I listened as the unit on the other side of the building was opened. A green glow flooded through the hole I made near the roof. I glided toward it like a moth to flame. I climbed to the ceiling and craned my head until I could see in with my left eye. The green was so vivid it took my eyes some time to adjust, especially after being completely enshrouded in the complete darkness of the storage unit. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out general shapes of things. The limo tires just outside, the green blob pulsing and flashing. A woman on the floor, her tight skirt ruffled well past her upper thighs. The woman moaned softly. It could almost have been a sexual noise. Her head was disappearing as if it had never been. The forehead, the eyes, the nose. Then the mouth, and all was quiet. The blob itself did not utter a sound. It flashed and glowed. Green swirled and intensified until the woman was gone. I felt dizzy and sick. I had to hold on to the brace beside me to keep from falling to the floor. The cloud seemed to sigh. It stopped swirling, then began to settle. It seemed like it was a slow action, but it was subtly quick. The green faded and became a woman. She was standing erect, chin upraised and thankfully facing away from me. She was completely naked. Muscles corded her body and seemed to vibrate in their stillness. I heard the opening of a car door, and the driver stood before the opening to the unit. He held out a lush red coat open for the woman to step into. She held out her arms and let the driver clothe her. The coat hung well past her knees, nearly to her ankles. The driver opened the door to the back of the limo, and she disappeared inside. I scribbled it down into the notebook, and when I got home, I typed it all up. A blue pickup truck pulled up and passed through the gate. I hadn't seen it before. I finished the paragraph of the story I was proofreading, the blob and the girl, then followed it into the facility. It was parked in front of one of the closer unit buildings. I didn't believe for a second I'd see something even remotely resembling normal, but what I saw left me gaping. Inside the storage unit, a heavy-set man clad only in a knife-pleat cheerleading skirt was down on all fours with his ass back up to the far wall. Blow-up sex dolls surrounded him. One was straddled on his back, riding him. Another was hung from the ceiling on the back wall, a strap-on sex toy fixed to the wall between its legs. The man was bumping himself back onto the toy violently. The blow-up dolls had been dressed up. Some were in cheerleader garb, others in basketball uniforms, but all were female. Blonde wigs hung from their heads at odd angles. Their mouths were all open, O's with ruby red, or sheer pink lipstick scrawled on their vinyl lips. What the... I hadn't meant to say it out loud. The man stopped bouncing against the dildo and shot his head in my direction. "God damn it," he said. He slid off the toy, which jiggled moistly between the uniformed sex doll's legs. He lifted his fisted left hand and pointed it into the corner. A little beep sounded from where the man had pointed, and only then did I notice the video camera on the tripod in the corner. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" the man asked. His face was flushed with the effort he'd undertaken. There wasn't the slightest glimpse of shame or embarrassment there. "Sorry, Damn right you're sorry. I pay rent here," the man said. "Sorry, sir," I said. "I was just making sure everything was all right." "Everything was all right until you showed up," the man said. "Now I'm going to have to shoot the whole scene over again. I'm on a schedule, you prick." Jesus Christ. When I got back to the trailer, I laughed until I cried. Then I wrote it all down. I started sending off stories, and some of them made it into the magazines. Some of them came back with personalized rejections. Doesn't seem realistic. Too fantastic. Couldn't relate. I laughed and laughed and laughed. The sedan pulled up and honked. I picked up my notebook and shut the trailer door. The man in leather waited until I was inside the car, then punched in the gate code and pulled into the storage facility. "There are dues that must be paid for our society to continue," he said. The car shook and a muffled cry emanated from the trunk. I couldn't make out all the words, but I did recognize God, help, please, and shit. This city, like all cities, is built on a foundation of blood and bone. Sweat makes it happen. There used to be more of us. Now there's only me. He stopped the car outside his unit. We got out and walked around to the trunk. Whoever was inside had sensed the car had ceased moving, and fright must have froze them still as well. "There's not much more I can do than what I already do," the man said. He slid his key into the trunk and popped it open. "No," a quaking voice hissed from inside. I took a step forward and looked inside. A wiry man was on his back, wide-eyed and panting. His thick glasses were askew, and his tie had nearly come untied. He scurried deeper into the trunk and put out his hands and feet to ward away his captor. "Please," he begged, "there is a debt. Everything is built upon it. It must be paid." He reached in and made to pull the wiry man out, but an animal instinct took over the captive, and he kicked and flung his arms wildly. The man in leather leaned back and waited until the other was still. "There is no escape. You're serving a greater good. You're crazy." The man in leather swung his arms suddenly, violently, and the man in the trunk ceased moving. He didn't ask for my help. He hoisted the unmoving man from the trunk, swung him up onto his broad shoulders, and put him into the unit. He went back to the trunk and got his tools. "I'm old," he said. "We don't age the same way as you do. I've been doing this a long time." He hung the clamps. "I'm not sure how much longer I'll be able to continue. I will until I cannot." He lifted the man and let the hook slip under his left shoulder blade. The man woke squealing. "You must write the story. You must put it out there. If the spark lies unlit, somewhere maybe they will see, read, and understand." He set the hook under the other shoulder blade. The wiry man's breath caught, and he held his body rigid, as if even the slightest motion caused a flurry of pain he couldn't begin to take. The man in leather spread out the plastic under the hanging man. "I'm not sure what will happen if the job isn't done. God help us." He set to work. I watched as long as I could, which probably wasn't too long, then slowly, quietly, slid the door shut and walked back to the trailer. I sent more of the stories off. They came back rejected, until one about the blob was picked up by an online horror magazine out of Australia. I printed the acceptance email and hung it on the wall above my desk. When I pulled into the little parking lot, there were 2 pickups parked. Gerald's Contracting Construction, it read across both of their tailgates. I opened the trailer's front door, and there wasn't room for me to enter. Along with Jimmy Klobbs and Mr. Yellow, there were 3 other men in there. No one noticed me, or at least did not acknowledge me standing in the open door. "We'll knock out the wall tonight and should be able to finish up by the morning," one of the men was saying. Jimmy Klobbs was nodding his head, sending his triple chins into a violent wave of jiggling I couldn't look away from. "As long as you don't get in anybody's way, you hear?" Jimmy Klobbs said. "People pay us to be left alone with their shit. We're not trying to lose any business." Of course. We'll be discreet. If anybody is in the area, we can wait 'em out, Mr. Klobbs." "Expect a call from me in the morning," Jimmy Klobbs said. I stepped aside and let him pass down the 4 rickety stairs. "Have a good night, Mr. Klobbs," I said. He didn't deign to answer. "This is the night help," Mr. Yellow said, motioning his sausage fingers at me as I stepped into the trailer. "Anything goes wrong, he's your man." With that, he too left. I punched in the code to the gate and let the 2 trucks pass through. I followed them to a unit building near the far east side of the premises. There were only 3 units in the entire building, but they were the largest the facility had to offer. I opened the center unit and heaved the door open. "Thanks, bub." The men walked inside and went to the walls on each side. "We'll start with this one," the man said. I assumed he was Gerald, as he did all the talking thus far. "Gerald, what exactly are you all going to do in here?" I asked. I knew they were knocking down a wall to make the space bigger, but I didn't want to go back to the front trailer yet. Gerald turned slowly on his heels and gave me a sidelong glance before answering. I think he forgot I was even there before I spoke. "Now, what's it matter to you?" He let the "you" hang, and it became 2 questions. What's it matter to me? And who was I? "Richard Dennison," I said. "Just wondering." "Well, do they pay you to wonder?" I wanted to hit him. I didn't. "You know where to find me if you need anything," I said. I felt all 3 men's eyes on my back as I turned and walked away from the storage unit. An hour passed, and one of the trucks pulled through the gate and headed west on south. The truck returned some time later, with the bed weighed down until it nearly scraped the pavement. There were 6 metal and plexiglass tubes, roughly in the shape of coffins, standing in the back, tied together and bound to the bed. The driver stopped at the gate and honked the horn 4 times. I vaguely considered giving Gerald and his men the code to the gate, then thought better of it. If Jimmy Klobbs or Mr. Yellow hadn't given it to them, then they sure as hell weren't getting it from me. I stepped out of the trailer and casually lit a misty ultralight. I inhaled deeply and blew the smoke out above my head before strolling over to the truck and leaning into the window. Yes, I thought. I could get used to these. "Break time over, boys?" I asked. The 2 men in the truck did not include Gerald. "Open the gate, asshole," the driver said. Hey, I said, lifting my hands up, palms out. "There's no need for that now. I was just starting conversation. Open the gate." I nodded and took another drag before punching in the numbers. As the gate slid on its railing, I said, "If you need anything now, don't hesitate." The driver didn't so much as look at me. As the truck pulled by, I studied the contents of the bed. They looked like space pods or cryogenic chambers or something as ridiculous. I went back to the trailer and scribbled away. The truck passed through the gate again and returned with 6 more space pods. I let them through after another misty ultra-light. They didn't say one word to me. The night crept by without either of the trucks leaving. I